We oftentimes don't record our small group collaborations at the Alliance, but we had nearly 200 people sign up for this particular collaboration group, whereas we have oftentimes 20 to 40. And so we really felt that this conversation was of interest to so many that we want to give the opportunity to have an on-demand access. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Kimberly George. I have the privilege and honor to serve as the current president for the Alliance of Women in Workers' Compensation. And with me today, actually our guest facilitator is Valerine Conerly. And Valerine, I'm so always grateful for your mentorship and your partnership to the Alliance. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yes. So I'm Valerine Conerly, and I've been in the workers' comp industry for about 15 years now. I'm a client relations specialist for United Heartland, which is a part of the AF group, and I reside in the DFW Metroplex. I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you so much. Valerine has been a blogger for the Alliance. She's given our organization so many ideas for sessions and the opportunity for us on our DEI journey to really help guide much of what you've been able to participate in. So when we were considering how to bring our group together and learn and share around Black History Month, Valerine had quickly come back with the topic of authenticity. And I think you'll find as we go through the conversation today that she has such a wealth of knowledge and is excited to share. We did have in the registration link, the TEDxSeattle has over 1 million views from Jodi-Ann Burey, whose YouTube on authenticity, while not always does everybody feel the exact same way as Jodi-Ann, it really affords us an opportunity to think about authenticity in a way that maybe we didn't know before. And I know certainly for me, once Valerine sent it to me, I watched it 2 or 3 times straight away, and I've watched it afterwards. So the basis of our conversation today will be around Jodi-Ann's conversation in authenticity in general. And so if you didn't watch it in advance of today.
My name's Colleen Hasler, and I am interested in taking the virtual 2022 Updates in Occupational Health course. This is May 11th to August 31st.
Can we get our audience
I wanted to confirm.
To mute?
It said the format is a virtual hybrid course.
Okay, can you still hear me? Okay. I'll take everybody off of mute once our guest that was having a phone call can mute her phone. Okay, so back on track. If you weren't able to watch the YouTube in advance, I still suggest that you go ahead and do that. We'll thank our sponsors at the end of the event, but if our sponsors are on, certainly want to give them a shout out now. We have a slide to recognize each and every one of them. So to get started, Valerine, what is authenticity and what does it look like to bring your whole self to work? And just so you know, Valerine will provide her response and then we'll open it up to you for your thoughts. We have maybe 6 slides we'll go through. So we do hope to make this conversational. But Valerine, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I would describe authenticity. She mentioned bringing your whole self to work. All of us have aspects of ourselves that we bring to work. Sometimes we're thinking of our physical appearance. So when someone sees me, they see a woman of color. But authenticity doesn't just mean your appearance or how you wear your hair. It's just all of the things about you that make up who you are. And when we're talking about being authentic, we're talking about being able to show up or present somewhere just as you are without having to conform or to fit in with the majority. So I'm going to ask some of you, what does it mean to you to be authentic? Sorry. What does it look like to bring your whole self to work?
I'll answer that. I'm Janet Sumner, and I've been in the work comp industry for over 30 years. And I started out as a case manager in the Chicagoland area, and I didn't recognize that I wasn't aware that you should have two different selves. So I always came in with who I am, um, whether that be how I presented myself physically or how I communicated my thoughts, or just being confident enough to share my opinions. But what I learned by doing that is that not everyone was accepting of me. And I learned that because I would say something and it wouldn't be heard until someone else said it in the room. Exactly what I said. But when I said it, it wasn't recognized. Um, and I started to have to learn how to be aware of my surroundings and the people that I was working with. Emotional intelligence became very much a part of what I had to learn and grow with in order to maintain my being authentic. When I heard about this subject, I wanted to just share, and I'm just going to make this quick, that being in the Chicagoland area as a case manager, I was given a caseload of all Black clients on the Chicago West Side and South Side. There were claimants that were 20 minutes away from me, or right here in Naperville, that were being assigned to um, white case managers who lived in Northbrook, in Schaumburg. And I said, what is happening here? I had a caseload of all Black clients, and I asked my supervisor once I found that out, why am I getting all the Black clients in the Chicagoland area? Some of them needed medical case managers, but it didn't matter. As a vocational case manager, they were assigned to me. It was the stereotype that my supervisor had that I should be the one who managed these cases instead of looking at the skill set that we all bring to the assignments. And I brought that to her attention. I was willing to do that because I felt like everyone should have the experience of working with community, not just thought I should be assigned to. So I was willing to say that 30 years ago, these need to be distributed to the skills that are needed for these claimants. And it was changed. So I think you have to be willing to express your concerns, and if the culture that you're working in doesn't accept that, then you need to look at what your other options are.
Thank you, Janet. Ranka, could you mute your and anyone else that's not muted, and then you can come off mute if you're going to share, if that's okay. Thank you so much. We just get some background noise. That's really good information, Janet. Thank you for that. Anyone else want to share?
One of the things that Janet shared was that she wasn't aware that there were two cells that you might need to bring, like one at work and one at home. But I'm sure that most of you have heard of a term called code switching, where, the way you show up at work may be different from how you show up with your friends. Do any of you feel the need or feel like you have to code switch at work? Or is there someone who feels that maybe they can't be authentic at work? Like, I'd like to hear, a couple other perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm Jessica Arnold. I've kind of had both situations where I felt like I've had employers where I felt like I couldn't be myself at work. Like I just kind of had to shut down and just do my work and go home. And then I've had employers like my current one where I feel like I can be myself and actually speak up and have a say in how I think we should proceed and do things, and I feel like I actually have a voice. So I think how you are perceived at work really depends on your place of employment, excuse me, in the culture. Um, and it's hard when you're in a culture you don't necessarily fit in for that work environment. And hence why at the time I left, because I didn't feel like I fit in with that culture. So I moved on to a place where I actually am able to be involved in the process and have a voice and feel confident enough to speak up and be a part of the process.
Hi, this is Tanisha Barmer. I've also, like Jessica, seen both sides. I worked in an environment where there weren't many people who looked like myself, and in that environment, I did feel like I had to code switch or really not be authentic the whole time that I was at work. But now that I'm in a more diverse environment and there are more people who share, similarities, I do feel that I can be more authentic.
Justina, were you going to share?
Yeah, I think that, sometimes when we talk about being authentic, I think it's about self-awareness. You have to know who you are, and you have to be able to go to work and be that person that, you choose to be. I think everybody has different personalities. And I think that, if we listen to each other more and learn about each other more of our authentic selves will just automatically come out as we, get to know each other.
I will say, Janet, when you mentioned you would raise your hand or speak and what you weren't acknowledged, there were, and some of you know this, but I just want to state it, that in 2018, 2019, a number of women of color specifically came to me to say, this is happening. I raised my hand. I'm not called on. And I began to pay close attention to this. And frankly, I found men would be called on first. I would be called on second, and a woman of color third. And my point with that is I focused on that every opportunity I had. And I even invited more women of color to meetings because I realized there wasn't good representation. And it's the women of color coming to some of us as well so that we can be allies. I wasn't as aware, and while ignorant of me, it's somewhat that journey that has helped lead the Alliance and where we are. And Janet's been a great mentor to me and helped recognize that. What I would say is all of us should be an ally around the voice of our women of color and each other. Because while I may not also be heard, I would be heard before women of color. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that, my own journey and how I was, really focused on that, thankfully, because of many of you on today. So really good points, and Tanisha and Jacina for sharing. Valerine, do we want to go to the next question?
Yeah, can we move to the next slide? Because I think it speaks about the room. So does racism impact who is in the room, who gets heard, and who listens? So this is a question I often find myself showing up to places, whether it's work or even at home, where I'm the only person of color, maybe in a restaurant, based on the town that I live in and the demographics. Or like my son is the only brown kid in his classroom. Like we show up in a room, and I just kind of curious, do people even notice when they're in a room and decisions are being made? Do you notice when people are missing, like voices from minorities or women of color, people with disabilities? How does racism impact, first of all, who is in the room? And once you get in the room, are you making space for other voices to be heard?
I'm
Hi,
gonna,
this is Fiona Shields from Sedgwick. I've been in the industry for about, I don't know, 20 years now. Um, I don't necessarily know that it's always racism that truly impacts it. I do think that prejudice impacts it. And I say that from a place of I don't necessarily. Usually, you notice things when you're the one that's impacted, right? If you're not impacted, if it's not your life experience, you don't see it, right? Never had any exposure to it. So when you go in, I just think that people truly don't think about it some of the times, and that's what happens. So I mean, and that's been my perspective as a Black woman. There are times when racism impacts and when being heard, where it's impacted, and it looks the same, whether it's racist or prejudice, it looks the same. But I can speak from experience; it doesn't always feel the same. It's whether they're open to hear what you're going through and hear what changes need to be made so that um, we will have more representation.
Well, I want to ask a question on that because you said it may not be racism, it may be just prejudice. But if you have an industry like the insurance industry and you walk out to, let's say a company has a large location with lots of claim reps on site. If you walk through the workspace, if you see 25 people of color, but you walk in the conference room where the decisions are being made and you only see one person of color or no people of color, do you not think that structural racism has had some impact in why you have all these people doing these jobs, but they're not able to rise to a leadership position?
I don't believe that that racism is never a factor. But I don't always believe that when you walk into a room and you don't see it, you don't. I do think, and that's exactly my point. So as an individual, when I go into a room and I see something or I notice something, or they haven't invited somebody, let's just say, I have found that there are many times when it really just wasn't something that had crossed their mind. When you're talking about the entire industry, then yes, there are, you know, racial impacts that could have oppressed a situation, and that's different. For me, it's always racism and prejudice have always been different for me.
But I think having conversations like the one that we're having now, someone who's on this call would have a hard time, the next time they go to a meeting and they don't see underrepresented voices, they'll have a hard time saying, well, I didn't know that that's happening, because we're having more conversations surrounding these topics. So we're kind of bringing it to the forefront.
And that I agree with.
Yeah.
I agree with that 100%.
I wanted to share that I think it's important that we as people of color raise those points. I don't think it's so much racism. Sometimes it is. I think it's a matter of preference, or that it doesn't even come to mind for some of our employers that there are things they can do to be more inclusive. Recently, I was very impressed by all of the posts that were on LinkedIn recognizing, celebrating Black History Month. But I noticed that my company hadn't put anything out there at all. We hadn't even acknowledged it internally. Um, Being who I am, I just asked, well, what are we doing about Black History Month? Are we celebrating it? Are we acknowledging it internally and externally? And the HR manager got back to me right away and said that he was sending something out this week, and what he sent out was phenomenal. It took another week before marketing replied to my request and indicated that it wasn't on their plans for this year, but they would like my support for next year. I would have not liked myself had I not said, what is happening with celebrating Black History Month? We're talking about being a company that respects DE&I and diversity, equity, and inclusion when we're on calls, sales calls. But what are we doing really? So, I may not be at the table with the C-suite, but I'm letting the C-suite know I'm in the company. And oftentimes, because I communicate and speak, I'm asked to join meetings. So it takes baby steps, but I think it's important for us to recognize the voice we have and use it.
Can we move to the next slide?
Yeah, there you go. What are psychologically safe workplaces and what do they look like? I think I saw Rosemarie maybe that was going to speak on the last slide. You can come on if you want to, and otherwise we'll move forward. Take it away, Valerine.
This question kind of ties into what Janet just spoke about. She noticed that her company wasn't as proactive, or she wanted to know what they were doing. And she felt comfortable enough to go to someone and say, what are you doing about this? I think that says a lot for her workplace being a psychologically safe place. When you can raise your hand, when you can come to work and talk about subjects that are tough. One of the things when I was doing research about authenticity and what that means to different people, some of the perspectives were, things happen in society on the weekend or during the week, and it impacts emotionally people of color. And then we have to come to work, but nobody has addressed it. It's kind of like the elephant in the room. This big thing happened, everybody knows about it, but nobody is talking about it. We need to have spaces where it is okay. If something happened on the weekend that impacted me, I should be able to come to work on Monday. And if I want to talk about it to another coworker who may be of another race, I should feel comfortable doing that. I shouldn't have to mask my feelings and just pretend like everything is okay and nothing happened.
Rosemarie, I now.
Yes, I'm here. I couldn't unmute myself. I was muted on the WebEx and muted on my phone. I agree that what makes it safe is being able to express your feelings in any way to any person, may it be another person of color or not, and to not be criticized for that, if that makes sense. So even with other people of color in the corporate environment, especially women, we tend to still have some stigmatisms and interracial issues too. And so I think a psychological safe workplace is making sure that we are supportive of one another and we make it safe to embrace each other's differences, even within the same race, right? And to make sure that we feel supported and comfortable and okay to express ourselves.
Yeah, who else would like to share? Thanks, Rosemarie.
I can say, this this has been really eye-opening for me. I live in Helena, Montana, so we're not very diverse. So I guess I didn't realize that all of this kind of was happening to people of color. And I'm looking back at all of this, like my experiences in life where like my mentor was a person of color who was the smartest person like ever, I swear. And he never was promoted. And I always wonder, and now I'm looking back, I'm like, was it because of that? Because Montana's not diverse. It kind of, I'm racking my brain, all these experiences of like things I didn't realize. And did these people not feel safe enough to say something to their coworkers or feel safe enough to talk to me about it? Or, I'm like kind of shell shocked right now, just of what experiences you ladies are going through. And I hope I've never made anybody feel like that or felt uncomfortable, because like I'm literally racking my brain, because I grew up in Washington. So I grew up in Washington State. I didn't think anything of it because I was always, lived in very diverse communities, and then I moved to Montana, and I didn't think of it being any different than how I was raised. And so this is amazing to hear this perspective. And I mean, I think a psychologically safe workplace is important for anybody to be able to communicate after a stressful day or a stressful weekend, to be able to talk to your coworkers and have some place you feel comfortable working in. I think is like crucial because you're spending most of your life at work away from your family, and to have that outlet and have somebody feel safe with, I think is extremely important for everybody. So.
And Jessica, I just want to say thanks for being vulnerable and sharing that, because the way we will be better allies, better leaders, better teammates, better citizens, better within our communities is by awareness and engaging. And so thank you for that, because acknowledging it might be a shock to others, but you're being real and you're being transparent, and you will be an ally and learn more, because now you'll dig into it. And we have some webinars from the Alliance that might be of interest to you, and certainly our women of color in the Alliance will be supportive of you as well, because it is about us being better together. And that's why the Alliance wants to push DEI so it becomes part of our DNA. We don't want DEI to be a educational track, right? We want it part of our DNA, and it takes work, and it takes us bringing our authentic selves and being willing to share these conversations. Jacina, I saw you come off of mute. Do you want to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that to be a psychological safe workplace is a place that's diverse. A lot of times I'm probably the only, person of color in the room or in my office for that matter. And, to get me to open up about, whatever happened over the weekend, and I'm probably less inclined to, because there's nobody else there that's probably going to understand fully how I feel. So I think that in order for a place to be, safe, it has to be diverse, and we all have to be open to everyone's experiences that they have, going on in their life.
And I would just like to piggyback off of what Jacina just stated, because that's very important. And I think that's one of the reasons why, in the wake of everything that was going on with George Floyd and, all of the angst that had been going on, I was able to feel safe at work because I had a diverse party of people who were coming forward, even within our CEO, and we had courageous conversations, and we stopped, and it's almost like the company paused and said, let's talk about this. And even on my team at the time, where I was the only Black person on my team, I was able to be vulnerable and go into our team meeting after a weekend, and everyone was like, how's everyone doing? And I was like, I'm not okay. Like, I can't even really function right now. This is hard for me. And the only way that I felt comfortable doing that is because I know that I had the support of the bigger group, even though I may not have been, and also my manager had been vulnerable with me. She grew up in upstate New York. She had not been around people of color a lot, but she was very interested in learning and trying to be an advocate. So that's also important.
I agree.
I also want to just add that when we're talking about authenticity and psychologically safe places, we're not just speaking about a person of color's showing up to an office. There are lots of ways you can have diversity. So, for instance, I have a 19-year-old, and he was recently diagnosed with ADHD. It's not something that you can see, and there are lots of adults who deal with ADHD, And when he, once we got his diagnosis, I talked about, you need to go to work and you need to let your manager know so that if you're having trouble focusing, she knows the reason for this. And he just told me, I don't feel comfortable telling her things like that. I don't want that to impact how I'm judged at work. So that's not just something for like a teenager, working at a Starbucks. We have coworkers who may not feel comfortable sharing whatever their difference is because they don't want to be impacted. So I just want to make sure that we all understand it's not just being a person of color. There are lots of, sexual orientation, or, if the mainstream is Christian and, this person doesn't believe or they believe something different. Like, we all have a lot of differences, and we need to learn to be more welcoming and hearing others' perspectives, especially in the workplace.
Anyone else want to share?
Hi, Kim. It's
Yeah.
Sandy Staub. I wanted to thank you and the Alliance for doing this program. The topic itself is, I mean, I would say it's timely, but it's so overdue. And I had not seen the TED Talk that was described in the description for this session until I saw the registration information for the session. And I went and I watched it to prepare for the conversation. And in doing so, I had multiple terrible memories of myself being the person who gave feedback like, you will go further if you can learn to talk in a certain way, and masking things in this shroud of what is professionalism, what is the acceptable norms. And I'm so grateful. And this is, it's years ago, and I grew up in a very diverse area between two major cities. So we had a lot of diversity in my school and my neighborhood. But I can't say that I was truly enmeshed. I had like one Black friend and, one Indian kid in my class. And so even though there were a lot of different, there was a lot of representation in my school and in my neighborhood, many people flock towards people like themselves because that's comfortable and just easier. Moving to the Southeast, I found the experience a little different, that there is much more, at least my perception was, more of a divide and more visible differences. You didn't have multiple people, races, colors represented in a room the way it was for me where I grew up. So I want to say that it's not just the acknowledgement and understanding of, this is something that I'm doing or I have done. I think it's really important that we sort of try to understand better, how can we do better? What is the right way to do this? What is the way to say, you know what, I'm putting together a panel, a speaker panel, and everyone is like white old men or all white women. How do I find those people in a way that, it's outside of like my direct network without offending? And I think there is a need for some tools and help for people who want to do better, to know how to do it in a way that is appropriate and to not offend.
Yeah, I can appreciate, Sandy, what you say, to not, you want to be inclusive, and how do you go about it? And to those of you on the call that say, yeah, Kimberly called me and said, I mean, I was just open, and Janet will remember this conversation. I'm like, I'm a white woman. I realize privilege, but I want to speak. I want to give anything I can to support women of color. And yet I don't want them to say, why her? Or if they say, why her, then help me understand how I can go around somehow to get involved in the conversation. And I think for myself, it was getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, knowing that the conversation had to take place so that I could be better and, frankly, not be the mentor, but use the platform. And ultimately, the Alliance Board said, yes, we want to go on this journey as well. And what I would say is we're all on a journey, all of us, around diversity, the definition of it, equity. What's equity mean to us personally, and equity mean across our businesses and our communities, and certainly with inclusion. And so you may align with one more than another, but it's our journey. It's our journey, and it's our journey together. And so, Sandy, you mentioned, and I made a note of, how can we do better and tools to help. The Alliance will have training by a certified trainer on unconscious bias. And we may think we don't have unconscious bias, but even on our journey, we realize it's different. We've got Jennifer Ryan, who you may have seen on our webinars. She's also hosting, in addition to that event, organizing sessions on microaggressions, because we don't always recognize that. We can get, how can we do better with tools and help that, our women of color can help put that together. How can we help? And the Alliance hired, as you may know, last year as a DEI consultant, Nagazi Naji, who is working with us right now, even this morning, on our DEI vision and our mission statement around that. That can just, again, be front and center on our website, so that all of us in our journey can, not only is the Alliance advancing their journey, but each of us. And so as you personally think of ideas, send them to us. Tools in the toolkit, but what else? Because we want to be an organization that supports these conversations.
Thank you, Kim. There's one more thing that I wanted to mention, and that has to do with being a former claim handler. I think that, we're in the industry of supporting injured workers and trying to shepherd them through the process and help them recover. And I will say that one of the things that I also cringe about in the past was, these preconceived notions about different cultures, races around their recovery for the injured worker themselves. And I remember vividly being told by a nurse case manager not to worry so much about this guy because his reaction on the pain scale was probably inflated because that was a cultural thing. And I don't know if that is recognizable to you also as a nurse, that was just accepted. That's how people spoke. That's how people behaved. That complaints would be sort of minimized or dismissed. And I think that we need to also have a component of this kind of bias training or recognition for actual claim handlers and perhaps nurse case managers as well. I know it's happening in medicine too.
So what are some of the ways that we can make space for others to be comfortable showing up authentically?
I think one of the things that we can all do is, sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say, I think one of the things we should do is to make ourselves vulnerable, right? If you, this is what I've found with my staff anyway. We're all human, and so if you show them the human side of you, if you make yourself vulnerable, then it makes it safer. It makes it a more open space, and it makes it so that they want to share with you, and they know that you're open to that.
And I agree. To piggyback off that, I think listening is a big thing, and honestly, caring about how others are feeling and what they're going through. Even if you are from different backgrounds, listening to someone else's culture and really caring about what they're going through would really make them want to open up more to you about what they have going on and what their life is like.
I think one way is through storytelling. So if you're vulnerable enough to show up as who you are and share, you know, maybe I come to work and it looks like I have it all together, but this happened to me on the weekend, or I'm dealing with this with my child, or whatever it is. Once you start showing and sharing your humanity, you connect with others. And oftentimes, once you start sharing, you realize, we may look different, but we deal with a lot of the same emotions and family challenges and just things in life.
I agree with that. I also would say that it's important to be a mentor or help someone who is communicating and not being heard, by saying, I've had this happen, and I try to, use it when I see it happen to someone else. I'm like, I think she hadn't finished her thought there. I make it go back to the person who's trying to communicate what she's saying, but feeling a little, maybe not as confident to go on. So I try to put the spotlight back on the person who was just trying to present herself. I think it's also important to help our coworkers, whether they're people with disabilities or whatever their difference is, just just keep their emotions in check, because oftentimes when you're not being heard or you feel like you have to have a mask at work, you can become defensive, or you may feel like, I don't want to work here anymore and give up. And I would say just encourage those who may not be recognized to give them the floor whenever you can. So that would be a way to help people be more authentic. Somebody has to recognize that person, and then others will as well.
I want to give a shout out to the men that joined us today and the men that will watch this. It is so important to us in the Alliance that we have male sponsors. Men that join today want to do better in their teams and their companies. And when I saw the number of men that had signed up, it just really warmed my heart that they want to listen and learn and are willing to engage with us. So I meant to do that in the beginning. But I really am appreciative, and I know all the other women are here too, because we need men to hear this. We need men to be allies, be sponsors of women generally speaking, but certainly are women of color, and such a great opportunity to join this conversation to move their own journey along. Valerine, what are your ideas around making space for others to show up? I know you've spent a lot of time on this topic specifically.
For one, I like to make personal connections. So if we're having a meeting and I see that someone isn't talking, they may not feel comfortable after the meeting, then I'll set up some time to just chat with them and get to know them. You'd be surprised what people will share with you once they feel like you're a friend or you're someone that they can trust. So sometimes we just need to reach out and take someone under our wing. That's one of the ways. Also, if you notice that maybe a leader has had a misstep, having a candid conversation with them, I guess, off to the side, letting them know, you said this and this probably came off this way. I'm sure you didn't mean it that way, but just being vulnerable enough so that the other person can be vulnerable with you and you can learn together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What other suggestions? Those were great, Valerine. Who else can share? Wants to share? If not on this, final thoughts on authenticity. We have one more slide, but I really would like some more feedback on authenticity if any of you have it. Generally speaking, did anything stand out to you or not when you watched the YouTube, or as you think about your workplace, or even what you might feel or need personally?
Oh, I know I've talked a lot, but I like to talk, so I'm sorry. Um, I was thinking about, what she was saying earlier, Valerine was saying earlier about, workplace and feeling comfortable enough to say, all the things that happen during your weekend, or feeling safe enough to talk about like a disability or anything. I think like one of my biggest struggles was telling my employer when I become pregnant. That terrifies me. No matter where I work, I'm always scared because I've had it where it's put me back in employment because they said I didn't complete a certain amount of time because I was pregnant or because I was out of work on maternity leave. And I don't know if anybody else I bet somebody else has experienced it. I hope not, but I think it's extraordinarily frustrating because I feel like that's like a happy time. And I've read some articles on that about how like another person going out getting like a knee replacement and being out of work for the same amount of time, and they're not afraid to tell their boss, but a woman telling them that they're going to have a baby, that's terrifying, and at least to me anyway. And it would be wonderful to have like a workplace to feel safe to say that, to say, hey, I planned to have this child. I was so terrified. I said that it was an accident because I was afraid to say it was a planned child.
Yeah.
And that's scary. And so I wish that was a comfortable thing to say at work to your employer or your coworkers.
Yeah, I think the ability to, whether it's a disability, the need for a leave, I would hope that those of us that are leaders, especially after the learnings of the pandemic, would have a greater amount of grace and desire for a healthy workforce, for well-being and mental health, and support that. So I know it's something I personally talk about with my company and our colleagues, if not every day, certainly every other day, and more days than not, helping our leaders think through that. So thanks for sharing, Jessica. Valerine, before I go to the closing slide, I know we had this set for 50 minutes, so we're coming up on our time. Will you give us some closing thoughts?
Yes, but first I also want to remind everyone, for those who may be interested, Ngozi is hosting a conference next week called Black Women in Insurance. I put the link to the details about the conference and the registration in the chat. So if that's something that you're interested in. Second, I just want to thank you for showing up today, being willing to learn and share. I think this is how we will move our workplaces to be more safe places where people can be their authentic selves. So I hope that you learned something that you can actually take back to your workplace or your organization and apply it.
Thanks, Valerine. I'll just let you know we have some upcoming events in April at RIMS on the 14th. Don't leave San Francisco without joining us for a brunch. It's on Thursday, the 14th. People will have plenty of time to get to the airport and catch those flights out. If you are local or have local employees, friends, peers in the industry in San Francisco, they don't have to be a registrant of RIMS to join us. So share that. I think Jennifer will have that out on the website soon, if it's not already, for our registration. April 27th, we'll be in Huntington Beach live the day before the Executives and Workers' Comp, so SoCal. And again, you don't have to be a registrant of the conference. If anyone wants to come and join us, we'll be furthering our conversation around the happiness effect, the research around positive psychology, and how that influences us personally and professionally. We will be at WCI in Orlando on August 24th, at the Dana Point Conference in California on September 6th. Comp Latte, again, back in Huntington Beach, October 3rd, and we'll finish out the year at National Workers' Comp in October. So in addition, we are hoping we'll be back to local events with our ambassadors as the year progresses, and we'll continue to have a lot of virtual events in support of all of our followers who joined us during the pandemic. If there's a good thing for the Alliance that came out of the pandemic, it's a great opportunity to join virtually, which prior to the pandemic, we had very few webinars and collaborations. So these are our sponsors on the screen. When you see those, thank them. They do not participate in the Alliance for recognition, and we are not supporting marketing at the Alliance. They simply want their logos on the screen to say, we see you, we hear you, we believe in the Alliance and the mission. So we're very grateful to them. It's why our events can be free for anyone that joins, and it really allows us the opportunity to be independent as an alliance, as a nonprofit, and yet have the backing of such wonderful companies that believe in our mission. And thanks to all of you for joining today, for being willing to have this authenticity conversation and to share. And I know I've said it before, but we are better together. We are so much alike and yet can learn so much from our differences. And thanks to Valerine, who's always so willing to put events together for us, to lead conversations. And thank you for this one. This is all on you, Valerine. So thank you for this authenticity collaboration.
You're welcome.
Okay, take care, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe and be well.